good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this session at Jack 10 2020 about COVID-19 and the rising importance of digital publishing. Who would be a better person to talk about this than the very famous Porter Anderson, the editor-in-chief of Publishing Perspective? He talks about, writes about, reports about publishing from all over the world. So he is the person to talk about and give us a good overview of what it means, the rising importance of digital publishing. Porter, over to you.
Thank you so much, Claudia, and thanks for having me. It's great to be here and to talk to your audience. I think this is such a wonderful week of programming. I've been watching everything going on and participating in some of the conversations. It's just fascinating material. Congratulations to everybody on the team there in Indonesia and you working with them and at Frankfurt. And I think it's really coming together well. I'm glad to be part of it. You're right that at Publishing Perspectives, one of the most interesting areas we've discovered had to do with something we've been struggling with for years in publishing, and that's the adoption of digital. As all of us know, there was a terrible bump, if you will, when digital publishing first arrived. This is almost 10 years ago now, but we actually had to start taking it very seriously and realizing there were ebooks, there were audiobooks, there were digital processes, and there was digital online retail of books as well. There were many aspects that started shaking and rattling the traditional publishing model, very difficult, making it very hard for all of us to deal with. And yet, publishing has done a good job. In most parts of the world, it has come to terms with what's available in many of the digital formats and what it can do in digital. This has suddenly, the virus has suddenly accelerated what we call digital adoption. It's something we could not have foreseen. It's something we would never have asked for, even though we think there are some very good parts of what's happening. This is certainly not the way we want to get them. However, in the words of Michael Tamblyn, who is the CEO of Kobo, I know many of you are aware of Kobo. It is the most internationalized of the online ebook and audiobook services based in Canada and owned by Rakuten in Tokyo. What Michael Tamblyn says is that he now believes that the effect of the coronavirus pandemic is to have accelerated by 3 years the adoption of readers of digital formats. Because, of course, when lockdowns occurred, they said, what can I do? I can't get to my bookstore, it's closed. I don't even want something to be delivered because we can't be sure that it's sanitary. We don't know if it's safe. How do we make sure that it's disinfected, a book? And what happened was they all said, I'll try an ebook. Another thing Tamblyn loves to say, he calls them the never-evers. The people who said, I will never, ever read an electric book. I love my print. And we all do. We all love our print books. They're very dear to all of us. But in the safety needs of the coronavirus pandemic, we saw readers reaching out for the first time and trying an ebook and trying an audiobook, things they hadn't witnessed before. Kobo, being smart and generous, took advantage of this very well. They started issuing free ebooks to people, first all over Italy, in coordination with the government out of Rome, and saying, we know you're stuck in your homes, you can't go out, let us at least give you something you can read. And this was smart, it's good business, because of course it introduced to many people the chance to read electronically, but it also was a generous thing to do, and they moved it around to many of their markets as the spread of the virus continued, and they've been great with that. But what we've learned is that that kind of thinking is exactly what we all need now, because when we see the acceleration of the adoption, when we see so many people starting to try an ebook for the first time, then the question becomes, how long will they stay with it? If, let's say tomorrow, and I wish this were the case, we all had a vaccination and the world was safe again from this terrible virus, would the people who have discovered ebooks and who have started listening to audiobooks say, oh, thank heavens, I'll never look at an ebook again, I'll never listen to a book again, I'm going back to print? Or, as we think is happening, we think a lot of them are actually going to stick with ebooks. They'll always have a mix. I mean, everyone will always want beautiful books in their home. The way I explain it to people, I'm a very big e-reader myself, because I actually love the fact they glow in the dark. I'm so excited I can read it in the bedroom at night, with no light. I don't need any help. I can just sit there and read. It's wonderful. But I also, when I get a book that I really love as an ebook, I'll then buy the print book because I want it on my shelf and I want to be able to enjoy it on paper later when I reread it. And that, I think a lot of us have come to terms with that. Same thing with audiobooks. I listen to them as I do my walks. I listen to them at the gym when it's open. It's not now. I listen to them when I'm in the car going somewhere. And if I find a book I really love as an audiobook, I'll buy it in print as well. So I have a hard copy for my own use. But I think that a lot of people are going to stick with ebooks because they have suddenly realized this is so handy. It's on my phone. It's right here. Or it's on my tablet. It's on my desktop computer. It's wherever I want it to be. It comes instantly. It didn't cost as much as the print book. And this has been a revelation to millions of users around the world who are trying these things for the first time. So we think that what we're seeing is, we like to think that Tamlin is right. It may be a 3-year acceleration, but it is a very heavy process of adoption going on. Because so many parts of the world now are undergoing a second level of lockdown, which is so upsetting, I know, but they now are even more familiar with the process too. A lot of them learned in the spring, I know what to do. I'm going back over and buy this thing online. And they'll pick right up where they left off. So in a way, a little bit like the vaccine, they're getting a booster shot. They're getting a second chance to look at these things and go, this was good. I might keep doing this, this is not bad. We think it's going to be a very interesting way to help accelerate the process in the consumer side. What does that mean in the publishing side? It actually means two things. It means, number one, there is a much bigger audience than we had even a year ago, maybe 8 months ago, for ebooks and for audiobooks. Digital now is much bigger than it was. And let's face it, there was a point at which during the lockdown in many countries, ebooks were the only thing producing any revenue. Thank heavens for them. Many of our poor booksellers couldn't even deliver books or couldn't have them at the curb for you to pick up, as is happening a lot now. And they were simply out of luck for a while. It was very upsetting. But the ebook trade kept moving. It was not enough to offset the income that you would have made on print, but it was enough to keep a lot of publishers alive. It was enough to keep them from having to fire too many people. It was enough to keep new releases coming out at times. For the most part, here in the United States, we delayed our releases. We didn't want new books going into bookstores that were closed. And so everybody pushed them off into the fall, which has now created something like the French rentree, where there's so many books at once this autumn. But some of our publishers said, you know what, we'll go ahead and release the ebook. We can then put out the print book later, but let's not hold back this great author's wonderful new book. People need to read it. They're in their homes. They need something they can do. So this became very, very interesting to see. And the second level of what publishers are looking at now, the first level being, we have more readers digitally now. The second level is, how well are we marketing ourselves digitally? How well are we set up for online retail? Do we use Amazon? Do we use Kobo, for example? Who are our distributors? Who are we working with in the digital space? Maybe Bookwire out of Germany, which is very big now in Latin America, and expanding all over the place. The people in publishing now are starting to think, okay, we have to think better about how available are we making our digital products, because more people now want those digital products. And a lot of them will keep wanting those products even after the pandemic is not driving us all crazy and making life as bad as it is. So we think there are two lessons here and two learning experiences we're still going through. But it's become a very fascinating process to see what we call the acceleration of digital adoption in so many parts of the world.
I remember before COVID, there was, ebooks weren't growing, or the growth of ebooks wasn't as expected, right? And I remember one of the big publishers sort of saying, we missed this opportunity, we didn't do it right. There are so many things that we could have done better in order to generate a better and a bigger audience. So do you think that ebooks now have improved?
I do. I think they've improved, and oddly enough, because they've become more simple instead of more complex. We have seen during the pandemic stages of lockdowns, I would say an average in various markets of as much as a 30% jump in ebook revenue. A little less in audiobooks, but that's not because they haven't wanted to listen to them. It's because audiobooks were already growing so fast. They have simply continued to grow fast, maybe a little faster. But they have been a very big growth area for a long time in publishing. But the ebooks have jumped quite a bit. And one of the reasons we think, and one of the reasons we think people will stay with them, is because in the beginning, publishers didn't really trust an ebook to be as enticing as a print book. They felt that something just sitting on the screen, glowing, as I call it, with the words on the page was too drab, even though that's exactly what it is on paper. And so they tried to do what we called enhanced ebooks. And those would have things like video pop up and audio happen. It was almost like, you never knew what entertainment was going to be on the next page. They didn't do it. We discovered that readers actually want to read. They want something that looks like their print book, and not to be too fancy and not to get too carried away. Similarly, I have to say that although we have some wonderful people working in virtual reality and augmented reality, those technologies have not taken off in publishing nearly as much as we thought. Because again, the readers we find really just want the digital format to be a more, what would I say, portable way to read. They want something they can take with them easily. Maybe you can carry 50 or 100 books on your trip. You don't have to have all of those things under your arm. They like that kind of convenience. It turns out that the digital attraction is more about convenience, accessibility. You can change the font size. I mean, there are some wonderful elements of e-reading that simply aren't available in print. Those are the things they seem to come for rather than the idea of we need to make them fancier, we need to make them do things. This is good to learn, and I think it was perfectly right to experiment. But publishers have now learned that the more simple approach is closer to what they want, a little bit pristine. And as long as you have a beautiful rendition of the cover, people do like to see the cover art. Beautiful color now, of course, is on every device. They're quite happy with this, and they would prefer it not be too fancy. Some people do use the dictionary functions in an e-reader and enjoy that very much because they like to look up words they didn't know, and that's very convenient. But for the most part, the simplicity seems to be the direction to go. I'm a little worried, in fact, with audiobooks, because in our country, which is the biggest market for audiobooks, we've gotten off into a trend that's a lot like radio theater. You remember the years when we all would listen to a play on radio, and you hear footsteps coming down the hall, and you hear a cast of 15 people talking in different languages. And it's a little bit more complicated. And I'm finding, just as a user, I prefer audiobooks with just one reader just reading me the story and letting me hear it, not doing funny voices, not trying to be 100 characters. So there's a little bit of a battle going on artistically around that part of audiobooks right now, which is fun. I mean, it's a good point to be at to discover which ones the audience will want. My guess is that they're going to prefer the simpler audiobooks as well, but I may be wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah, we'll find out, I suppose.
We'll find out, exactly.
Yeah. And when you say that we saw a growth of, let's say, 30% in ebooks, is this mostly trade titles or romance titles?
Actually,
books?
That's such a good question. Lots of children's books, of course. And this is interesting because the children's sector has never taken to e-reading as much as adults have, because most of our young parents really like to put a physical book in front of the child and read it with him or her at night. When it's bedtime, you have your story from a beautiful book where you looked at pictures together, right? But we have an awful lot of our young parents who also had to work at home and needed the kids to get real busy with a lot of things they could get more cheaply in digital formats and in much more abundance. It was hard, let's face it, during the lockdown to get new physical books into the home for the children who were sitting there with nothing to do after they'd done their little lessons. So a lot of people started introducing the kids to more e-reading on a tablet, even a phone. A lot of teenagers, of course, have phones. It's not unusual at all. So they're able to look at them on their own devices. So that went up. Children's sector went up. Another sector that went up was how-to. was nonfiction
Oh, really?
instruction. Yeah, because, the people are sitting at home, they're going, I've never fixed that lamp over there in the corner. I've got time to fix that lamp now. And so they would download a book on how to fix the lamp in the corner. And
That's
it was very
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes
because
perfect sense. Yeah.
yes, it does. But on the other hand, there's so much on YouTube. I mean, there are videos
There
on
is.
just about everything on YouTube.
There is,
So
but it
it's
turns out some
amazing.
people still like to have a book on instruction,
Yeah, and
on
it's
how
more
to do.
authoritative, right? Because it's a writer
Exactly,
and it's
exactly.
a publisher and not just someone who puts his experience in unboxing a phone or something like that.
Precisely. Now, granted, fiction was the great draw, of course, for adults, because everybody needed to get away. Everybody wanted something to take them out of their situation for a little while. Maybe when
Escapism.
they, yeah, escapism, exactly. Once the kids went to bed, give them something to take them off into another world. But I'll tell you what I found most poignant, because I'm a terribly big traveler, as are you, Claudia. We live on our planes normally, and people started buying travel books because they decided once we're through this thing, we're going to get on a plane and fly to Greece because we've never seen Greece. So wherever it is they want to go. And so they would buy books, they would learn about the place they were going to go, pick out where they want to be. It's nice to see that. It became a way to look forward to something important that would get them out of the pandemic and help them realize life was coming back. And
Yeah.
I found that very, very moving in a
Yes,
way.
absolutely.
So, yeah, so
Absolutely.
travel books did very well. I'll tell you the most interesting thing in audiobooks we saw in the first 3, 4 weeks, both here and in the UK, and I think in Germany as well, a bit. There was a downturn as the lockdowns began in audiobook listening, and everybody panicked. Everybody thought, oh my God, they're not listening to our audiobooks. What's going to happen? It turns out that's because, particularly the parents, no longer were commuting back and forth to work. So they didn't need to listen in the car. They didn't have that time. They weren't on the subway. They weren't on the metro. They weren't anywhere that they normally listen to an audiobook. They couldn't go to the gym, all those places. So for a while, they stopped. And then we think what happened was they started figuring out how to tell the kids, you read this ebook over here. I need an hour to read and listen to my book. So they found that to be time for themselves. And a lot of them would teach the kids, when I have my headsets on, don't bother me. I'm listening to something nice. And so they learned to kind of take time back to themselves. A lot of the adults did. Again, to escape, with a wonderful book. But to get back to audio. So it had gone down and then it started rising, which was great. And came back and, of course, went far beyond where it had been before. So it's been very interesting to see these very human responses to such a crisis,
And what did you, and I mean, a lot of schools were closed for a while, and universities don't have physical lessons any longer.
Right.
So do you know anything about ebooks in the educational?
It was quite wonderful to see. And this we know from our friends at Copyright Clearance Center. They were one of the first of our copyright management organizations that went in and said to the publishers of educational material, we've got to free up this material. What was happening was that normally the copyrights would prevent somebody from, like a teacher, from getting online and working with copyrighted material to students all over town, if it were, let's say your class of 30 is spread out all over the place, so you're talking to them on the internet. The publishers jumped in, they signed a special license that CCC created that said, you can do this. You can actually get on in the teaching space and you can work with our material. We give you permission to do this. And this was great. It was a way of adjusting the copyright regulations so that all over the world, this was happening in many parts of the world, the teachers and the students could work on their curriculum material in the digital space without having to pay extra for it and without having to worry about what would have been a copyright violation. Some of the publishers had to work very fast to make more digital renditions of some of their content. Perhaps they had only produced certain textbooks in print because if you're in the lower grades, you're not expecting to do a whole lot on computers with the kids, and they had to do that. They had to create lessons from that work online, and they did it. So our publishing community was wonderful in responding to that very fast. And as you know, now whole universities are working by remote
Yeah.
because they have to. As soon as the kids come to the campus, they all get sick.
Yeah.
So they've had to adjust this in a very big scale, and it's working quite well. Again, because the publishing community has responded so well. It's been great to see that. But we are lucky in publishing too. We have to remember that unlike many industries, our staff can work from home most of the time. And most of our people, it's not as easy for some as others, but most our editors can work from home, our authors can work from home. And the interesting thing that's happening now is that a lot of publishing houses that used to have everyone come into the building every day and they sat at their own desks and everything, now are going, maybe we don't have to have everybody here. Maybe we don't have to pay as much rent for this big, expensive building in the middle of Jakarta or wherever. Perhaps we can just actually let them stay working from home because the bosses, the CEOs, the executive world has learned they actually do the work. You know, there's always been a suspicion in some, and I think this is true in every culture. Are they really going to do the work if we let them work from home? No, we need them at the desk. Turns out they do the work.
Yeah.
They need, what happened is flexible scheduling. When the publishers discovered that as long as they would say to an editor, you don't have to get it done by 3 o'clock. If you can do it by 9 tonight, that's just as good. We can look at those pages tomorrow once you've got them done. That worked because then maybe the mother at home with the children could put them down and get them nicely off to bed and then do the editing she needed to do. So a little bit of adjustment in timing was necessary, but otherwise the employees came through. Everybody has actually shown we can do this from home. That saves on commuting, that saves on energy of going back and forth, on fuel, and on rent. So
yeah, saves on rent, and the guys who are renting out the big offices. Yeah, I mean,
they are
one person's gain, it's another one's loss, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid the real estate industry is very worried about this.
I think so.
In the biggest cities, there are buildings that might stay dark. So.
Yeah, and the cities, you know, not only the office buildings, but also the shops in the downtown areas are suffering very much. Yeah. So
and this can be bad. This can be bad for our bookshops that are located in those city centers.
Yeah.
If the traffic just isn't there anymore, because people aren't out shopping, they may have to move closer to the consumers. They may have to move out toward the suburbs.
That could very well be. Yeah.
When, in other words, it's not done yet. We're still adjusting.
Oh yeah, of course. And we will see, as you said earlier, how things will develop once we are in the new normal.
Exactly.
Since we were talking about education, ebooks or digital books or digital material, there used to be, or there are reports which say that children, and not just children, also adults, learn much faster and more effectively when they learn or study with printed material and printed books. What do you say to that? Do you think there's already a change, maybe in the brain or in the way we produce the ebooks?
You know, I'm of two minds on this, and I wish I could make up my mind to tell you the truth. But I have such dual experiences in my own career. One of the things I always explain to people, a lot of times when I'm covering a press conference, you'll see me like all the other reporters taking notes. Even though I have a tape running, I'm recording what they're doing, but I'm still writing it down. And I've had people go, why on earth do all of you reporters still write everything down? You're taping it here. And I go, you know why? It's because we hear it better. If we're writing the words the speaker is saying, if you're mentioning Emmanuel Macron, make a statement, right? You want to make sure you get him right. You listen better if you're right. And so what I think we're learning about this is that it may be less a function of reading on a physical basis as it is on ingesting it on a physical basis. I think the kids, students of any age, not just young kids, can probably learn just as well in a digital format, from a screen, if you will, if they're encouraged to write it as well, if they're encouraged to interact with it on a physical plane. That may be on a chalkboard even, or it might be writing on paper. It might even be typing it themselves onto another keyboard. Nothing wrong with that. You're still learning it because you're transmitting it through your mind. As long as you're doing something tactile about it, you're learning quite well. So what my advice is right now to publishers who are concerned about this is don't be afraid to go into particularly the educational space with digital, but encourage teachers, other educators, parents, to make sure that the child is doing a reactive physical task with it, in some way engaging in a way that I'm sitting right here with my reporter's pad right now. I'm never without this. I want to see them doing this as they're watching whatever's on the screen because they'll learn it if they do that. And I think that's the key. We thought for so long it was a matter of do I learn from the screen as well? I think it's more about what am I doing with my hands? If I'm doing something that makes me in touch with what's on the screen, I'll be fine. And in that sense, I think people are learning just as well from digital. It's a jump. It's sort of a leap of faith that I think we need to take in that regard and to see how well it gets us. But more and more, we're going to learn because during these months of digital education, there are now reports coming through as we do surveys going, the kids learned this much, they did not get this as well, they did get that as well. Various parts of a curriculum did not go as well as others did. We're learning a lot about just how well they absorbed from digital. We hadn't had that chance again. So in a sense, that's another part of our acceleration into digital. We're learning and accelerating how well we understand what we can do with it.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see coming back to the digital books and reacting to the crisis, how things will evolve in Asia. So in many countries, people were very afraid of producing too many ebooks because of the copyright infringements and the digital piracy that's happening all over the place. So there was only very little growth. Even in Germany, ebooks only were, the official number said that ebooks only made up 5% of the whole turnover. And in many Asian countries, it was just 2% or even less. So I will be looking forward. I hear that Gramedia Digital, the biggest publisher in Indonesia, or one of the biggest publishers with also a huge bookshop chain, is also doing a lot of digital books now. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Good. I'll be very interested to see how that goes.
Yeah.
One of the cleverest things I've seen in the world of digital, I think, was in Malaysia, where they discovered that one of the things that people wanted most to listen to or to read on their phones were daily devotionals. And so suddenly it was a great moment for the religious publishers because they were able to produce very nice short, if you were on the metro or if you were just walking to work or something, you could read a short devotional, get your inspiration for the day, feel in touch with your faith, and keep moving.
Yeah.
And I thought that is very clever.
Yeah.
There was a funny parallel to that in the United States. You know, the Alexa device, the Echo devices from Amazon have been very popular here. And one of our Christian publishers, HarperCollins Christian, suddenly discovered, you know what? There's nothing on Alexa in the way of a prayer or a devotion. We will make those available. And they talked to Amazon, and Amazon said, yes, this is great, please. And so now you can ask her to read you a devotion, and she will. Which is quite wonderful when you think about it. That's when I love to see publishing adapting and thinking, what have we got that nobody else has? Clever, you know? That's when we're really using our heads. Yeah, it's good to see.
Yeah, so that's also a very good roundup. Even though the publishing industry altogether is still a very traditional industry, it's also a very creative industry, obviously.
It is.
And it's also adaptive and brings things together and develops and evolves and develops new things. So there's a lot of innovation in there.
Innovation, the name of the game. Yep.
Exactly. So yeah, unfortunately, we've already come to the end of our session. It was so lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much for your insights.
Me too, Claudia. This was fun. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And we should say thanks to our audience for being interested and being with us on this really interesting topic.
Absolutely. And we're looking forward to seeing what's happening in Southeast Asia in digital publishing.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see that and to write about it at Publishing Perspectives. Come read us.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So this was the session, COVID-19 and the Rise of Digital Publishing. Thank you all for listening to us, and thank you, Porter, for sharing your insights.
Thank you so much, Claudia, and enjoy Jack Tent, everybody. It's a wonderful conference. Have a good time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.